Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Prasad here, who is going to teach us about Hinduism. He is a volunteer at the Hindu temple in Maple Grove, and he was telling me some great stories about how they responded to COVID, because we were both in different places responding to COVID. So if you wanted to share a little bit of that too in your presentation. He will have about 30 to 45 minutes presenting, and then we'll have time for questions. And then at about, I'm going to give my 5-minute warning, so that way at about 10:30, again, we will be able to go to small groups, just so you know. So thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay? Awesome, perfect. So first of all, thanks for having me, and thanks for finding the time in the day to learn a little bit about Hinduism today. My name is Prasad. As Caitlin was saying, I'm a volunteer at the Hindu temple. So if you just go on 101 all the way sort of down towards Dayton, you're going to hit the temple. So I don't know if anyone ever visited the Hindu temple at all. Oh, wow, a lot of hands up. So that's awesome. Yep. So we do have guided visits at the temple on certain Saturday mornings. So if after the presentation, if you had some free time and you wanted to sort of, actually see the temple or see actually the Hindu sort of worship in action, you're very welcome to, come there, and there's kind of an email. I'll share it with you at the end. So just email, and then we can definitely set up some time for you guys if you were interested. So as I said, my name is Prasad. I've been volunteering for the temple, so I kind of lead the guided visits at the temple. I've been doing that for quite some time. And then obviously I'll do some outreach presentations as well. Does anybody know anything about Hinduism? Do you have any Hindu friends in the community, or have you ever visited a Hindu sort of an event? You have? Okay, awesome. So without further ado, we'll kind of get going here. So anybody know the origins of Hinduism? Where did Hinduism originate? India? I heard India somewhere. Yeah. So the modern day India, if you look at the map, is way different and much smaller than what the original, sort of the Hindu sort of, aspect of the country used to be at once upon a time. But if you go back in time, it's the most ancient organized faith tradition of humanity, and it's been practiced for thousands of years, so more than 5,000 years old. So if you kind of look at Judaism, it probably even predates Judaism to a certain degree. And again, when you talk about history, right, I mean, nowadays, can I dig somewhere and find some, some artifact that I can kind of date it back in time and see where it came from, where something that's that old and ancient, you can't really even find it. There were no like Google Cloud or servers that you could just kind of put all your nice photos, right? So obviously, there's a lot of historical references over time and a lot of scriptures and stuff that exist to date. But basically, as I was saying, it kind of originated in the Indian subcontinent. And the question is, what is it truly called? So the religion is actually not called Hinduism, but it's called as Sanatan Dharma. That's kind of the term. So a lot of, the words in Hinduism come from Sanskrit. So you've heard the word karma, dharma, they all kind of rhyme. So these are actually Sanskrit words. So what does Sanatan Dharma mean? It basically, loosely translated into English, it means eternal, sacred tradition. That's sort of the word for it. So what is dharma? Dharma basically means cosmic law and order, the path that sustains life and virtue. So if you look around you in the nature, right, everything kind of works in law and order. There's spring, once the spring comes, there's going to be, the leaves will start to bud, the flowers will come, the birds will be chirping out. The sun kind of, rises in the morning, sets in the day. Everything works in a smart fashion, and that's what kind of sustains the creation. It sustains us, right? But humans, what's special about humans? It's not special, but we have free will, right? And when you have free will, you're open to choices, which you can make good choices or bad choices. Everyone have pets in their homes, right? And what does a pet do? You can treat the pet whatever you want, your dog or your cat, but they will love you the same way no matter what you do, right? So similarly, if humans kind of work like pets, the world would be a different place, that you just love each other no matter what comes your way, life would be much better. But we obviously have the choice of free will, and sometimes selfishness kind of takes over and we make bad choices. So that's where it's a tradition or a path of life which helps you be good, and that's what Sanatan Dharma technically stands for. So if it's Sanatan Dharma, why is it called Hinduism? Anybody? Does anybody know? Probably not. Okay. So long time ago, there were these Persian scholars that were visiting India. And this is kind of the northern part of India. So if you look at this map, this is the Himalayas. You've heard of the Himalayas. These are one of the tallest mountains in the world. A lot of glaciers. And from there, naturally, you have rivers that kind of start. So there used to be these 7 rivers. They were called the Sapta Sindhu. So Sindhu is kind of, the main kind of the river that existed. And things have obviously changed now. So these Persian scholars were visiting at that time, and they saw these people living on the banks of the river called Sindhu. Now, apparently, they can't say the words properly, so when they went back, they kind of messed up a little bit, okay? So Sindhu became Hindu. Now, when they were talking about Hinduism, the Greeks found out about it, and they can't say the word ha, apparently. So Hindu became Indu. That's where India kind of comes into play, if you kind of loosely think about it. And the Indus Valley civilization. So the Indus, that's how these words came about, and they kind of stuck to us. So this is modern day excavation. It's in Pakistan right now, which used to be, as I said, a part of India at once upon a time. This is Indus Valley civilization, and this dates back to 5,500 BC. And you can see they actually have bricks. There was a city there. They had sewage system. They had like aquifers. It was a very, very advanced civilization. And this is not where it started. If you think about someone's building something like this, those people obviously existed before that, right? So that's what you're seeing here is kind of how ancient, Hinduism technically is. And since then, that river Sindhu dried up. And obviously people migrated. So they kind of moved into the Indian subcontinent. So now what you see now is kind of different than what it used to be once upon a time. So how many Hindus exist in the world? Is it the first, second, third, fourth, fifth largest religion? Anybody? Wild guess? Close. Third. It's the third largest religion in the world. Today, out of 1 in every 7 people in the world is a Hindu. Most of them live kind of in the Indian subcontinent, Nepal. Not a lot of Hindus in the United States, maybe about 3 million or so. And then only about 60,000 Hindus living in the Minnesota region. So not a lot that you'll see around you. So what is the Hindu belief system? There's no divinely revealed, it's a divinely revealed religious spiritual tradition. So basically, long time ago, you had these kind of monks or saints, whatever you want to call it, who kind of had revelation or they meditated and they kind of found these answers. And you can sort of loosely see this in all religions. Like there was somebody who was kind of, enlightened in a way, if you look at it from a Hindu lens, and they kind of found the truth, right? And all of them kind of came to the same conclusion at the end of the day. So it was not like 1 or 2 people saying that this is what it is. So it was a spiritual way of life developed over thousands of years by meditation, self-contemplation, rigorous philosophical discussions and practice. And over time, these diverse practices evolved over time, mirroring unique traditions. Now, think about a religion that's more than 7,000 years old, right? 1.1 billion people practicing it over a period of time. And during this time, India has gone through a lot of cultural shifts. There's been a lot of conflicts. So things evolved over time, right? I mean, even if you think about Christianity, which is kind of relatively new, how many different ways is Christianity practiced in different ways? I mean, even if everyone follows the Bible, still mindsets change. I, had the privilege of, when I was studying, I was in Loma Linda, California. And it's a Seventh-day Adventist institution, right? When do they follow Sabbath? Saturdays, right? While somebody would follow it on Sunday. So these are sort of the unique little things. And some people follow Sabbath very strictly, where the whole university town would shut down. There was nothing going on. One day I made the mistake of, I was my first week there, so I took my laundry and I went to I was living in the dorms, and I put all my laundry in the laundromat, and it wasn't working. And I'm like, oh, it looks like it's not working. So I called the dean, and he came down, and he's like, we need to have a talk. Do you know what Sabbath is? I'm like, oh, I thought it was Sunday. Okay, all right, shoot, I didn't know. So this is kind of, as I said, the little nuances that are different, but still the message stays the same, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about. So if you go to India right now, right, here's what you'll get. You have 121 languages that are spoken. There's 19,500 dialects, and there's 22 scripts. So you move from north to south of India. Now, there's obviously some common languages like Hindi, English, certain languages everybody speaks, so you can communicate. But imagine going from Minnesota to North Dakota, and all of a sudden they're speaking a completely different language. The billboards are all in a different script. You could get lost, right? But they are probably talking about the exact same thing. I mean, if someone handed you a Bible in Aramaic or in Hebrew or some ancient language, you would think it's a different book. But at the end of the day, it's the same message. So what I'm trying to get at is the diversity of Hinduism comes from its history, and the diversity kind of brings a lot of different sort of ways Hinduism is practiced in today's days. And even I wouldn't say I know all of them. In fact, when I came to Minnesota, and our temple is pretty unique, where we try to showcase the different ways Hinduism is practiced. There was a lot of ways, or some traditions that even I wasn't aware of. So that was kind of the fascinating part for me. But the message at the end of the day stays the same. So what do Hindus believe in? The most common misnomer is they are polytheistic, and they worship a lot of gods and goddesses. And that's sometimes it's actually even in some certain American textbooks you will see that. But it's actually not true. So what do Hindus believe in? There's one supreme divine consciousness. We call it Brahman. And these words you don't have to remember, but if anyone ever said Brahman, that's what we stand for. It's that one God. How would you say it in Sanskrit? The word is Brahman. What are the qualities of the Brahman? So as a human, as a layperson, it's beyond me, because I operate with my senses. And I look in the world for clues, and I try to describe it, but I'm always going to fall short. But the seers, or sort of the saints, or the avatars we talk about, who talk about it, basically the qualities comprise of truth. It's a living consciousness, it's full of knowledge, it's infinite, and there's bliss. So it's not happiness, it's bliss. It's one level way beyond. So that's what it is. And what's interesting is that divinity, that all that we're talking about, is right inside me. That's what Hindus believe. And it's inside all of us. So this covering we have of a human body is just a temporary clothing we have, but our aim in human life is to look inside and get to that truth. So that's why if you see Hindus, the way they greet each other, they put their hands together, they bow down, and they'll say namaste or namaskar. And what that means is, I respect that divine spark that lives within you. The light that's within you is no different than me. We're all the same. We're all connected. And I bow down to that. So that is what that Hindu greeting stands for. Plus, it's very COVID-friendly, or, you don't touch each other's hands. So it's easy to stay healthy, right? No, that just came later. Okay. So Brahman is that from which everything comes, is sustained, and into which everything ends. So that's one of sort of the sayings you will see in the ancient texts. It's beyond space or time, form or gender, impossible to quantify with the human intellect. So something that's infinite, now this is kind of getting into sort of the science of things. If something is infinite, right, it already exists, I cannot exist outside that. So I come from the divine, so this creation is divine. It's just that the trees or the plants and the soil, the consciousness is dormant. But anything that's living, moving around, that consciousness exists. And in the humans, it's kind of most evolved for a reason which sometimes we choose to see or we fail to do, right? But that's where we are. So if we are all in this room, imagine if this room was sort of the Brahman, or we're all within it. Now, we think this is our identity, but we are a part of the room. And eventually, if you go beyond, you will see you are the room itself. And once you get to that level where you start seeing the divinity with everyone, like you see sort of everything is divine, that's when you transcend. And that's kind of what the Hindus believe in. So if you look over here, there's a saying that Brahman is complete and infinite. The creation and the creatures are also complete. From the infinite Brahman, all creatures manifest. Having come out, all creatures from the infinite, everything still stays the same. So it kind of is trying to explain to you what that God stands for. So that's kind of how we look at it. And again, if you look at it scientifically, like if you just look at, anybody with a physics background or engineering background, if you think about physics, Einstein, even if you look on a material level, everything is energy. It all is constant. You cannot create something. It has to it comes from one end to the other. It just changes, but everything stays the same. So that's sort of the reason behind it. Now, something that it's so complex, right? How do you try to understand it? So what Hindus do is they try to sort of create sort of different identities to understand a part. So for example, I'm here today to talk to you guys about Hinduism. So I've kind of put on a certain role, right? I'm also a medical professional, so tomorrow I'll be kind of in my clinic, I'll be taking care of patients. Next day, when I come home, I'll be kind of talking to my kids, doing something else, right? So I'm taking roles. I'm the same person. So similarly, we look at the divinity in different forms. So when you talk about this creation, right, every creation has a beginning, it sustains, and then it ends. So you have the three aspects of it, right? So we call that, in this cosmic manifestation, we give masculine and feminine forms to sort of certain aspects. So it's, again, it all is the same. It's the same divinity we're talking about, but we kind of give it the trinity of Hinduism, which is called Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. So Brahma is the creator. That's the name we give it. Vishnu is the sustainer who kind of, everything, when it's happening, he's sort of responsible for it. And then Shiva is the one who puts it back into its formless state where it kind of goes back into the Brahman. And everything is cyclical, just like what you see around you. Everything is cyclical, right? You have the seasons, you have birth and death, and birth and death. You can see that it's cyclical. Even if you look at our planets, you look at the Earth, everything's moving in a cyclical form. So everything that is infinite just kind of gets recycled, and we are just kind of a part of it. We're part of sort of that circular chain. So that's what it is. Now, on a physical level, what are we all made of? Energy, right? I mean, what's in my body right now, if you look at it on a microscopic level, there's atoms and molecules just circling around. We just take our body for granted, but on a microscopic level, it's energy, it's carbon, right? From ashes to ashes, dust to dust. We come from the soil, we go back in the soil, right? And the soul kind of transcends. That's how Hindus kind of look at the bigger picture. So these are sort of concepts on sort of a divine level. And then how does it apply on a material level? So we believe in avatars. So have you seen the movie Avatar? Avatar? That's the way, you see, it's not Avatar, it's Avatar. And it's nothing to do with the movie, by the way, but Avatar is a Sanskrit word, and it means incarnation. That's what it stands for. And these are divine manifestations which happen from time to time, from age to age, in different aspects of the universe or in the world, which helps guide the humans on the right direction or the right path. So that's kind of what you'll see. So Hindus, based on their temperament, can either choose to pray to one of the manifestations like I talked to you about, or they can kind of pray to the formless. So if I close my eyes and I start praying, and I'm just kind of going to keep my mind blank, how easy is that? Not much, right? I'm going to start about what am I going to cook for dinner? What are my kids up to? Do I have to pick who am I supposed to pick up later today? The mind just swirls around town, right? But if I came to the church or I went to the temple and I had an icon in front of me or someone was giving a sermon, now what happens? My mind is focused and it's easy for me to sort of walk that path. So that's how, if you go to a Hindu temple usually, you will see an icon. And it will either be of Vishnu, either Shiva, or one of the feminine manifestations we talked about. Now, we're not praying to an idol, because sometimes, if you look at the Abrahamic faiths, they're like, idol worship is bad, but there's a history behind it. If you see how things work and what kind of idol worship they're talking about. So we are not worshiping a statue or a stone. We are worshiping, it's just our sort of a drawing board. If you're Einstein, you can do a math equation in your head. You don't need a blackboard and a chalk. But most of us, we need that, right? So going to the temple is sort of our focusing board. That's what helps us to connect. But if you're on a higher level, you can just close your eyes and look within you and meditate, and you'll still get to the same destination. So you can either do the worship outside, or you can do the worship inside. So there's a lot of sort of options you have. So if you go to the temple, you're going to see one of these icons. And again, as I said, I cannot do justice to the divine because I have never seen it myself. But I'm going to give it a human form because I'm human, and I'm going to kind of create some sort of an artist rendition. So there's nobody there with 6 arms or 3 heads or anything. These are metaphysical sort of concepts, because something that was so ancient. So first of all, a lot of these texts were sort of talked about. So, they were translated from one generation to the other in a poetic form. And then when you have sort of these pictorial representations, you remember things pretty easily. So that's how these temples sort of were designed. So there's many manifestations of that one divinity. So it's your choice. If you look at this light right now, what's the color? It's bright white, right? But if I take a prism to it, what's going to happen? It's going to split into lots of colors, right? And each of those little lights or colors is the truth that's hidden inside the bright light. So that's how Hinduism operates. That if I like that blue color, which eventually helps me understand that universal white color, I'm going to pick the blue and kind of walk towards it. So that's what we're looking at. So we talked about the divine concepts, and then we talked about avatars. So these are sort of mortal manifestations in this world from time to time. So in Hinduism, you will see Rama, Krishna, Hanuman, and I actually have Buddha here, right? So you've obviously had someone talk to you about Buddhism, right? Well, Buddha was a Hindu prince. And if you read his story, his teachings, his enlightenment, his followers kind of created Buddhism based on what was happening culturally or at that time in India or his followers moved more east. And then Buddhism kind of was born. And so were 2 more religions, Jainism and Sikhism. They actually kind of came out of Hinduism. And there was a time when Buddhism was pretty prominent and lived side by side with Hinduism. So again, there's one truth that the wise speak of in many ways, and everyone has the right to exist. So that's how always Hinduism has existed through the ages. So, no, this is not here by mistake. Okay, this is not a temple. Do you know which church is that, or which cathedral is that? No, it's in Paris. Notre Dame. Yep. So I just had for spring break. My daughter wanted to go to Paris for the longest time. She takes French in school. So we actually went to Notre Dame, and beautiful. It just opened up because they had the fire, so they opened up in January. And obviously, it's a Catholic church or cathedral, so there's a lot of sort of these, things you see. And, my eyes caught this kind of there's like a statue, and I just kind of went there to see what it was, and underneath it says Noah, and in Noah, God made a covenant with all creation. So that's kind of caught my eye, and there's a reason it caught my eye, because we talked about avatars, like, the incarnation of the divine. So over time, we believe Vishnu is the one who has incarnations, and about 10 of them, and 9 have already happened, so we believe there's one more that's yet to happen. But the very first avatar, we call it, is called the fish form, okay? So basically, there used to be this, pious king or a good person who used to go to the river every morning, kind of, start his day there, do the prayers, and then kind of continue with his daily duties. Well, one day, a little fish jumped out of the water and said to him, you know what, I'm going to be eaten by some bigger fish here, so can you help me out? And he's like, whoa, a talking fish. Okay, cool. So he took a little earthen pot, he put the fish in there, took it home. Next day, the fish grew bigger. Next day, it grew even bigger. And it grew big to the point where he likes, hey, buddy, you're big enough where you can fend for yourself, and I can't take care of you, so you go back in the water. The moment the fish went back in the water, he put it back in the water, a divine form came out of the fish. And he said, I was just checking to see if you were the right person for this job, because it's a very, very important job. And he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, sorry to tell you, but there's a big flood that's going to happen here very soon, and everything's going to get wiped out. So I'm going to be sending a boat down your way, and you got to get on the boat with these 7 sages and their families, and you got to pick all these animals and certain things. So I'll make sure you stay afloat, and once the flood waters recede, I'm going to take you to a mountain place where you can start creation all over again. Interesting story, isn't it? So that is called the first avatar of Vishnu, or the creator, and that's what we call as Matsya Avatar. So this is actually a temple in India on the right side, and you can kind of see it's a carving of Vishnu coming out of the fish, and it's about 1,000 years old. So that's the temple there, and then on the left side, it's kind of a depiction of, you can see Vishnu coming out of the fish, and he's kind of guiding the boat with the sages and everybody on there. So you have two totally contrasting religions, right? Two different ends of the planet, right? And a very unique story that's being shared. So what does that tell you? It's like we all connect to the same place at the end of the day. And just to sort of control or create our own identities, we'll sometimes separate. So the key is to go beyond that, see the commonalities, see what the real truth is, and we'll all eventually be the same. So that's why I always like to talk about this. We talked about saints. There's millions of saints in India. Okay, they have existed through time, and they will never be like, with fancy headgear or fancy coats and driving a Tesla. They will always be very simple. You can see these four guys, they could have been very rich because they had a lot of followers, but this is how they lived. And one of them, the third one, is Swami Vivekananda, and he's actually come to the U.S. in the 1800s, I believe, and he actually visited Minnesota too. There's actually a church, I think I've visited the church, I'm kind of forgetting the name, but he actually came there, so it's pretty fascinating. But these were people who were enlightened. So these are humans like you and me, but who achieved sort of that higher, understanding, and through them also you can learn. And they always have the same message. They won't have conflicting kind of, information for you. So as a Hindu, how do I practice, right? So my practice is a combination of things you see here. So yoga doesn't mean exercise, okay? The word yoga basically comes from the Sanskrit word yuj, or yoke. You've heard the word yoke, right? Which means to unite. So it's to unite with my spiritual identity. That's what yoga stands for. And a part of that is discipline, right? So if my body is strong and if my mind is calm, then only I can go on that journey. So that's the reason why you exercise, or so you can sit and meditate and kind of focus inside. There's 4 ways Hinduism is practiced. One is called Raj Yoga, which is the path of meditation, physical, and mind control. So the 4 pictures I showed you before, the saints, they kind of do the austerities, and they will kind of usually only follow that path. Somebody like me, I'll have some discipline in my life. I'll get up in the morning. I have a small place in my house where I'll pray. So I'll take a shower, I'll sit there, close my eyes, and just kind of say a prayer. Jnana Yoga is the path of knowledge, right? So that's what you guys are here for, it's knowledge. But knowledge without action is entertainment, right? So you have to apply what you learn. Otherwise, you can just talk about it, go home, and keep doing the same thing. You really didn't go anywhere. You just fooled yourself into thinking you really did something. So that's important. Path of devotion, which is easy, is to show your love towards that higher faith and show your love towards everybody else around you. And that's what kind of culminates into Karma Yoga, is path of action, where if you are a pastor or a teacher or a doctor, engineer, whatever you do in life, do it selflessly. Do not do it for selfish reasons. So if you realize that there's divinity working through you, you let that divinity kind of do its job. And when I was in school, as I said, I was at Loma Linda, there used to be these big pictures. And, there was one where you see there's a surgeon who's operating, and you see Christ standing behind him. And you're allowing him to work through you, So you are just a conduit. And that picture always stays with me, because that's how Hinduism is where I allow that divinity within me to do its job. I'm just the vessel, and I don't take credit for it. You shouldn't have ego in your life. You realize you are nobody. You just let that divinity work through you, and that's when good things happen. So this is sort of how Hinduism is supposed to operate. So what is the goal of human existence? You follow truth, have compassion, be disciplined, and obviously, keep things clean around you. It's okay on that journey to attain wealth. You're not looking for wealth, but prosperity can come to you, but do not be connected to it. Make sure that prosperity comes through the right reasons, and it's not for you to keep, but to share. Self-control, it's kind of the 6 sins or 7 sins. Every religion talks about that. Stay away from all, sins like anger, greed, delusion, arrogancy, jealousy. And then Hindus believe in reincarnation, because we are all on a journey. We have the choice of free will, right? So whatever you do in this life, you're accumulating. The reason you got this life is because what you did in your past life. Some of that kind of trickled and gave you this birth. And you are on a journey. We're all sort of on an escalator. Eventually, we're going to get to that higher sort of elevated place where we realize who we truly are. Some people are just standing stationary on the escalator. Some are trying to walk down. Some are trying to actually walk up. So depending on your choice of what you do, you're going to get to your destination. But no one's kind of, in Hinduism, no one is kind of like shunned forever. You do something bad, well, guess what, buddy? You got to pay for it. So you will either pay for that in this life or you will pay for it in your next life. So sometimes, when we see something's, this person was good, but something bad happened, Hindus believe that there was probably something from the past that came through and you just had to go through it. And there's plenty of examples, that sometimes people will kind of talk about. Eventually, you're going to go through these cycles of birth and death and kind of transcend that, because at the end of the day, as I said, what's within you, imagine we are all these little lamps, okay, and we are all in a glass container. Depending on the fuel you're using, you could end up getting a lot of soot on the glass, right? But the flame inside is all the same. So just because you see one that is dim because of the soot and one's burning bright, the flame's the same, but the moment you start burning the right fuel, that one with the black suit is going to look exactly like the one. So that is kind of our goal. So that's how Hindus kind of are supposed to operate. So this is kind of the deep metaphysical part of things, but Hindus do have fun. So they're not just talking about sort of, the discipline in life. We do celebrate a lot. There's a lot of festivals. We just had Holi, which is kind of those kids throwing colors at each other. And it's kind of, it's the harbinger of spring. You enjoy spring. Now, if you're in India, it's nice and warm, so you can be outside throwing water. You couldn't have done that 2 weeks ago outdoors. You would probably be kind of sick with a bad cold and frozen somewhere, right? Diwali is called the Festival of Lights. So on the upper right side, you can see this lady is actually with different colors. Like, they will actually hand paint these sort of beautiful designs. And then there's a lot of lights and stuff. So, kids will burst firecrackers. Again, there's historical reasons why that happens. You're celebrating the victory of good over evil. So that's the reason for that. And then on the left side, that's the Hindu temple. And every year we have like an annual celebration. So you can kind of see that there's that kind of a unique kind of a ritual that's kind of happening over there. So that's that. And then, we all come from the elements. Our body is made up of the 5 elements at the end of the day. So, people will take pilgrimage. They'll go to like a holy river and take a bath. There will be sometimes like a fire that's lit and people will kind of just have fun around it. So there's a kite festival that also happens in spring, so you can kind of see there's a lot of celebration. And again, because of the unique traditions, it's done in very, very unique ways. So that's kind of the beauty of it. Temples are a big part of Hinduism. And what is a temple at the end of the day? The temple is like my body, okay? So when you go into the temple, you're just simulating what your body is. Well, you're trying to go within. So at a certain point in time, architecture, science was very advanced. So you can see that temple on the left side. You can see the size of that person down there, and you see how big that temple is. These temples were built thousands of years ago. They're still standing. If you look at the bottom right side, that temple was carved out of a mountain. So it's one large mountain, and they just dug right into it, and then you not only have that, but you actually have stories from the past that were actually carved into sort of these rocks. So a lot of temples that exist. But as a Hindu, you don't have to go to the temple. I could be in my home, or I could be outdoors somewhere, closing my eyes and praying and meditating, keeping my mind clean, and it's still going to get me sort of to the same destination. So that's kind of sort of, you can do whatever you please. There's a lot of text, so there's not just one book that the Hindus follow. You have the Vedas, those are sort of the original texts, and then sort of the philosophical treaties or discussions, kind of it's called the Upanishads. There's a lot of historical, things like the Ramayana and the Mahabharata where certain things happen. Bhagavad Gita is a very interesting text, and that is the kind of a dialogue between Krishna, who is an incarnation of Vishnu, and his disciple Arjun. And if you ever read that, it will give you a summary of how Hinduism technically operates. All of these were written in a poetic form, so once you recite it, it's hard to forget. It's not just like sentences. So that's why it was easy to transmit this information over time, to sort of from the past to the future. So these are the texts. I mean, you could spend a lifetime trying to really read and understand. But some people actually do it. I haven't read all of those, so I'm not that learned. How does Hinduism relate to other religions? So the biggest thing about Hinduism is we don't believe in conversion. We don't believe that our way is the only way. It's kind of like when I came to this church today. I took Bass Lake Road and I took 101, right? I'm sure not all of you took the same road, right? But your aim was to get to the church, right? So if I said, nope, Bastodkar is the only way you should be taken to the church, you're probably going to be going the wrong direction. So we each, based on our sort of temperament, take a path. And our aim should be the destination, not the vehicle. And that's why sometimes conflicts happen in the world, because we just think my way is the only way. Well, no, there are ways to follow. And if you live together in peace, it all gets you to the same destination. And based on that history, as I said, there was 3 religions that branched out of Hinduism. They're born out of Hinduism, and they are thriving. In fact, Jainism is one of the religions, and there's a Jain temple within the Hindu temple because it's a smaller community, but we kind of get along really well. So you'll actually, if you ever visit the Hindu temple, you'll have a small Jain temple in there. As I said, we do not believe in conversion, so you will not see any Hindus, talking to you about converting, because there's actually no actual a ritual in Hinduism which allows you to convert. There's nothing there. It's just a path of life, right? That's how our Hindus operate. So someone comes to me and it's like, how do I become a good Hindu? I'm like, if you're a good Christian, you're already a good Hindu. So you follow that and you're still going to be just fine, right? Some of the history, so, if you look at Judaism, one of the biblical lost tribes of Israel, they actually escaped kind of persecution and ended up in India. And this was 722 BC. And they actually still exist. Those Jews are actually still kind of practicing Judaism in a certain part of India. And in fact, recently, they actually did some studies, and Israel actually gave them citizenship to Israel because they found out they truly were sort of the lost tribe, that they kind of could document to. Parsis, so they're kind of actually people from Persia. They were Zoroastrians who were being persecuted, and they came to India, and that religion still exists to date in India, and they've been flourishing well. Dalai Lama, who is the head of Buddhism, right? He's actually exiled in India. So up in northern India, there's a place called Dharmashala, and he actually lives there, and that's where Buddhism has stayed for a long time. So that's kind of how it goes. So sort of to end this, we are all divine. We are all a part of the divinity. We just don't realize that because we focus on the external. We focus on this world. We focus on our desires, and it just kind of brings us sort of, it doesn't, we are all looking for happiness because our true nature is to be blissful inside. But we kind of you're kind of climbing the wrong tree, basically. So if you take a step back and look within you, you will kind of find the answer. So the key is not to focus on the body. It's more to focus on what's within. Our differences of race, gender, even species are all superficial. So, the same divine spark exists in my pet that exists in me. So if you respect everything, there's a prayer every morning when the kids get up. They're told to say a prayer where you put your feet on the ground. You say, hey, Mother Nature, I apologize. I have to put my feet on you, but that's the only way I can start my day and do good in the world. So respect the nature as well. So it teaches you to be respectful of everything. That's why most Hindus, they're supposed to be vegetarians, because you don't want to take a life. You don't want to kill an animal and eat it. So you're supposed to be, but we cheat, unfortunately. We're all, as I said, destined for final liberation and realization of the truth, but it's kind of like, hey, I want to be in the Olympics, right? I can't do that just watching an Olympic game on my couch, eating chips and drinking a soda, right? There's people who are doing the Olympic Games. They've put in a lot of effort and discipline to get there. So you can be in the Olympics too. You can find your true, path, but you got to put effort in it, and it'll come to you. So respect, love, and be kind to everyone and everything. I'll end with the prayer. It says basically, Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah. Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti, 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 which basically means, may all sentient beings be at peace. May no one suffer from illness. May all see what is auspicious. May no one suffer. Om, peace, peace, let there be peace. Thank you so much. This is our Hindu temple in Minnesota. It's about 2-3 miles away from here. So if you're ever interested in visiting, please do let me know. Thank you for your attention. Namaste. All right. Yes, yes, absolutely. Yes. So it's a festival that's celebrated in Hinduism. And it's basically, it has many stories behind it, but one of the avatars is called Rama. Okay, so Rama basically, he fought kind of, it's not a demon, but he fought kind of a bad guy, happened like 7,000 BC, around that time frame apparently. And then on his way home, it was a kind of a dark fortnight, basically the new moon night, and it was very dark. So the people in his kingdom or his village, they lit a string of lights to help him guide his way back. And that's kind of how that festival started. So Deepavali means a string of lights. That's literally what it means. And that's how that festival started. So you're supposed to get up in the morning, you're supposed to say a prayer, then you meet up with family, you exchange sweets, and then you have fun and you light crackers. You could very well celebrate Christmas the same exact way, right? So that's the cultural part of it. But the reason is that. So it's one of the most important festivals. And it usually happens kind of around October, November time. So the Hindus follow the lunar calendar. So every year it's not exactly on the same day. It kind of changes a little bit. So that's one of the important festivals in Hinduism. Yes?
Can you talk just briefly about the caste system? Is that religious-based or not?
No, it's not. So I got this question because, so caste is not a Hindu word, okay? It actually word comes from the word casta, and casta actually comes from sistema de casta. Does that sound Indian to you at all? No, yeah. So it's actually comes from Spain and Portugal. So India, as I said, it went through a lot of conquests. The Mughals came, so these were sort of Islamic rulers who took over. Then kind of came the British, came the Spanish, came the French. And at that time, they sort of brought certain traits with them. And at that time, Hinduism was kind of on its down low because everyone was being persecuted. There was temples that were destroyed. And there was kind of a social hierarchy that actually used to exist in Spain and Portugal, and they kind of transplanted that into Hinduism. And Hinduism used to have something called as varna, and varna means vocation or my job. Okay, so if you go back into sort of the Hindu literature, it would say, when you come into this world, you're born with certain qualities. So you use those qualities in the smart way, you're going to do good. So you basically, the society, for it to operate in a smart way, you have to do the job which is good for you. That's only society functions. So the society was developed into 4 parts. It was the intellectual people, or kind of, the teachers, right, or the priests. Then you had sort of the government, which used to be the kings and the warriors who would keep you safe. Then you had sort of the business class, which kind of did the trade and kept the economy going. And then you had the physical workers, who you would obviously kind of help doing things. And that model still exists to this date. But when sort of the social hierarchy was being formed, obviously the affluent people wanted to keep control, and you can go anywhere in the world and you'll see the king, his son had to be the king, even if he was good or bad, and then there used to be conflict. So a lot of this caste system got imposed when the British and the Spanish came. It never really actually existed before that. And there's obviously something that's that diverse. So actually, caste system exists in Christianity. It exists in Islam within sort of the Hindu continent too. But for some reason, it's kind of labeled on Hindus. So when I go to the temple right now, nobody knows what you are or who you are. So my family, at one point in time, they kind of were sort of the intellectuals or the priests. But I'm a doctor now, so I do something kind of different. So it doesn't really truly exist to how it's sort of portrayed. Now, is there social, unfairness? Yes, people will sometimes use sort of the bad things, but it exists everywhere, I mean, if you go back into the history of America, people said, well, there's a chapter in Bible which talks about how to treat your slave, and then we had slavery for the longest time here, and people would say, well, it's in the book, and I can do it, and I have control over you. So that's where sometimes some of these bad things. But to get to your question, caste system, there's no mention of that anywhere in any of the Hindu texts. So, yep. Yes?
Just to follow on to that, my college advisor self-identified as Brahmin
Uh-huh.
from India, and obviously he was an educator and also a attorney and lawyer.
Yep.
So using that term, which is more of a religious term for Hinduism,
Yep.
how he
Yes, I know exactly what you're saying. So there's four classes, right? The sort of the educators or the priests were called Brahmins. So it's not Brahma, it's Brahmins, right? Then you had the Kshatriyas, which were the warriors or the kings. Then you had the Vaishnavas, which were sort of the business people. And then you had the Shudras, which were sort of the labor class. That's how it was. But over hundreds of years or thousands of years, right? I can also say, oh, I came from that Brahmin family. And sometimes you're kind of carrying, it's kind of like, I'm Amish or I'm Irish. You sometimes have that's your cultural identity where you came from. And sometimes people just like to say that. But what does that imply? I mean, he's an attorney, right? So he's technically kind of, a Kshatriya, if you really think about it. But just based on the family name, like within that too, you would have clans, like how you have different clans if you're the McCoys or you're kind of the, so you have these different. So similarly, within sort of the Hinduism, within Brahmins too, there used to be clans. And people get confused. I mean, sometimes you just kind of listen to what you're told. Even my parents would say, oh, you are a certain class of, a Brahmin, but there's a history behind it. But beyond that, it honestly means nothing in today's day and age. So what's interesting, if you go back in time, the Vedas were actually written by a sage who was actually born to a fisherwoman. And with his meditation and stuff, he actually became sort of one of the most important sages in India. And he wrote a lot of the Vedas. So there's a lot of this cross connection you will see in the ancient India. But over time, some of those messages kind of were messed up. That's all it was. Yep. Yes?
I don't know how to ask this exactly, but my son-in-law is from Nepal.
Nepal, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
And so we've been learning a lot about the different Hindu festivals, traditions. My daughter and her husband were married in Nepal.
Okay.
With Sanskrit language for the ceremony.
Yep.
My granddaughter has gone through all of the blessings.
Okay.
She's 3 now, so she just had her a year ago, she had her second birthday.
Okay.
We had the big party. But from my perspective, it's a big party. I would like to know more about some of those traditions, because as I've been watching, there's so many similarities to what we do in Christianity.
Yep.
To what they do in Hindu.
Yep. Yep.
I know that, she's got a couple more big events in her life that she will go through.
Yep.
And I just want to know what's happening.
So you're right. So, a lot of this over time, right, it evolved, right? So there's the Vedas, which kind of talk about the basics of what you do, what life is. But then, at the end of the day, we are kind of all communal people, right? I mean, we're a collective sort of species. We like to be together, we like to celebrate, and we want to be happy in a good way, right? So some of these festivals or sort of these religious ceremonies, they kind of evolved later. So if you look at the original text, it really truly didn't exist. But obviously there will be, so if you listen to what they say in Sanskrit, it will just be a blessing, So they will say, okay, you are coming of age. Here's, we wish kind of, good luck upon you. May the God kind of work through you, do the right thing. So the message is very simplistic, but when it's kind of said in a language you don't understand, it feels very grand and official, right? So that's a part of it. But you're absolutely right. It's about being good, coming together. So if you come to the temple, right? I mean, you sit in front of sort of this temple, and the priest is kind of saying prayers, and they're saying it. Sometimes even just listening, I mean, as I said, we're all made of energy, right? And first there was sound, right? Even if you look in the Genesis, does it, correct me if I'm wrong, right? There's mention to sound. And, when we talk about sound, it does have an impact on how your mind, your body works. So when in Hinduism, we say the word Om. Okay, you've heard Om being said. So it's a primordial sound, and we believe that that was the first sound that emanated when the creation happened. And you don't need your tongue to say that. So if I put my tongue and just lock it to my teeth, right, and I can kind of start saying ah, oh, And if you actually say it in a loud, smart way, you will see that the sound actually starts in your belly, and as you say ooh, it kind of comes up into your throat, and the M goes up. So it's the energy that's moving from top to bottom. So if you even say that sound, and what's interesting is if I add another sort of syllable to it, amen, amen. There's a lot of rhyme to it. If you look at some of the ancient, they say Gregorian chants, they actually, if you study it scientifically, they come in a very certain megahertz of sound or audio. And just listening to that, even you don't understand because it's Latin, it will still make you feel good. So a lot of these mantras, they're said in a certain way. So a lot of times people come to the temple, you just feel energized. Being there, you feel at peace, you feel good. And we're all there for a good reason, right? When you come to the church, I've attended multiple sermons when I was in Loma Linda. I would actually go and just in the evening, and Sabbath, everything closes down. My friends would go to the church, I would go with them, and I would just listen to someone speak. Then there used to be a kind of, you would sing kind of a hymn or a prayer at the end. You feel good at the end of the day because that inner spark, the positivity connects to that outside and it comes out. So all these festivals are just recognition. You feel good about, the kid feels good, the family's coming together, and then you're all there for a good reason. So that's kind of how a lot of these, sort of things happen. And culturally, it'll be a little bit different. If it's Nepal, it might be a little bit different, but the inner workings of these prayers or these ceremonies kind of stay the same. Yes? Oh, either of you, yeah.
Well, I have a surrogate granddaughter. Her name is Shabi.
Uh-huh.
Her mother is Hindu. When she had this beautiful head of black hair until she was a year. They shaved it all.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
What was the
Reason for it? So again, it's cultural, but what I understand, I did that to my daughter too. Yes?
5 minutes.
Oh, 5 minutes, perfect. I did that to sometimes when you, like if you look at a lot of Hindu babies, like for that matter, sort of the Indian genetics, they come with a set of hair when they're born, and my daughter was like, she was kind of in the nursery and there's like 5 people outside looking at her. And we're like, is something wrong with her? No, she's got such beautiful hair, right? But basically they will shave it. And actually in Islam, they actually do that as well. From what I know, certain sects of Islam do it. But basically what you're doing is you kind of clean off. And then if you think about your hair follicles, they get thicker, apparently, if you kind of do that. So they'll do it at about a 1 year's time. When you become 1 year old, they do it for boys too, actually. And it's just a ceremony. And then it actually, apparently, there's some scientific reason behind it. And then you just get a better, thicker set of hair. So that's supposedly what's done. So, yeah. Yes?
You said you come to this life because of your past life?
Yep.
But where does it start? You just say you want to be a Hindu and...
No. So, as I said, I could have been a Christian last life, or I could have been anybody last life. There's no way for me to tell who I was, because I strongly believe we all come from the same place. We're all the same, right? But whatever is conducive for me to continue my journey. So imagine I have a quiver of arrows in my back, right? So that is all my past karma or my past actions, right? Now, all that is usually not going to come to this life. So whoever is kind of keeping tabs on sort of that complex equation, right? They will give me this life with one or two of the arrows and say, okay, you go forward, you do your job in this life. So it creates a little bit of a blueprint, but then I make choices along the way, right? So that's how this works. So it's a portion of my past actions that brought me here. And now this life is a culmination of wiping out, either I get the good, or, whatever good I made helps me with this life. Whatever bad is going to come to me as well. And then whatever choices I make in this life, it's kind of like a credit card. You're going to accrue. If you pay off what you kind of put in, great. But if you keep accruing debt, well, it's going to come with you. Someone's going to come looking for you, right? So it's the same concept. So it's portion of it comes this way. And I mean, someone asked me, well, what if I was born as an atheist, right? That's also an option. Well, maybe that was the right way for you to progress in this life for whatever reason. So that's how it works. Now, am I just stuck to being a human? No. If I did something super bad, because maybe at one point in time I was not a human. I was probably somebody even at the lower level, in the creation, and I slowly transcended up, and I could go back because I was really, really a bad person. So there's a reason behind it. It's way beyond I could say. There's kind of I know there's 5 minutes. I'll kind of speak yes, but it's a quick story. I'll tell you. There's two good friends. Like one guy was a naughty guy. He kind of partied and did all sort of the bad things, and one guy was kind of this pious, religious person, right? And one day they met each other, and one guy was like, the good guy was crying, and the bad guy was jumping, and he's like. The bad guy said, guess what? I was walking and I found a gold coin. And it's like, I don't think I could have been luckier. And the other guy's like, I just got bit by a snake. And then he got upset and he just says, I'm a good guy, I do all the good things. Why did I get bit by a snake where my bad friend ended up with a gold coin? And he had a dream that night, and sort of a divine form came and said to him, you're actually going to die today. But because of all the good things you've done, you still had to pay for some of the bad things you had in the past. You just got bit by a snake. The other guy was supposed to get a pot of gold, but because of all the bad things he was doing, he ended up with just a gold coin. So again, the story goes, you don't just see what you see, there's more to that story. It's kind of like, Harry Potter, it has 7 movies, and you just pick one movie in the middle, you're not going to have a clue what's happening. This life is sort of the same in a way, where there's more to that story. But that's the key is, you do your duty and your action, not thinking about what's coming to you. You just accept it as a grace of the divine and keep going forward, because whatever is happening is only happening on a physical level. It's not happening. Once you find who you are and you're happy with the present and you connect to that divinity, this physical body, once you realize it doesn't matter, you will always be at bliss. You'll always be at peace. That's the message, basically. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah, afterlife in the sense where whatever I do here, there's different realms out there which are not physical. They're beyond that. So there's obviously stories that tell that once I let go of this material body, that soul has accumulated the karma around it. So that energy kind of transcends this mortal world, and it might kind of take a break somewhere else, which could be bad or could be good. But then eventually you're going to come back, either to earth, or we also believe there's different realms, which a lot of are not aware of. But you could go into a realm where you continue your journey forward. That's kind of what happens. So there's nothing eternal where once this human life is done that I go one place or the other. Unless I'm one of those saints, which I'm not, you will never come back. You kind of escape the cycle of birth and death because you realize who you truly are. It's kind of like you are in a dark room and we have a blindfold on top of that, and you're just trying to kind of figure out in your head, hey, what's going on? But the moment the blindfold comes off and the light turns on, you know the truth. And once you see that, you understand the reality, and then there's no point in putting the blindfold back again or turning the light off. That's sort of how it works.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.